Yeah? Okay. We got the cue, so I think we can begin. Uh, yeah, this is the panel, Dancing on the Ruins of War. First of all, I would like to welcome you all. Thank you all for coming. This is the first panel of the second day of Festival Grounded, a festival of electronic music, critical thinking, and activism. This year's theme being peace. And who is more eligible of talking about peace than somebody coming from a country dreaming of peace in the midst of war? Of course, we are speaking of Ukraine, that is still suffering from a full-scale invasion that Russia launched last year on February the 24th. With us this morning is Human Margareeta. She is a DJ, a promoter, and electronic music producer from Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, of course, that has played in many renowned clubs all over Europe. She's the founder of Cuticor, a feminist electronic music collective, and a cultural activist that continues to spread awareness about the war in Ukraine. So, Margarita, first of all, hi.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. And of course, this is just a formality. My name is Luka, Luka Volk. I'm a journalist at Mladina Weekly, and I will be moderating this panel today. Uh, so, Margarita, let's maybe start at the beginning. February the 24th, 2022. Uh, Leading up to the invasion, there were, of course, many speculations, many thinking that Russia could never invade Ukraine in such a large scale as it did. How do you remember the days leading up to the invasion? Did you imagine days prior to it that Ukraine would end up in such a situation as it has? And maybe do you remember where you were on that day, the 24th of February, and how do you remember it?
Um, yeah, so uh, a couple of months before the actual invasion, anxiety started to build up in Ukraine. And in February, I planned, like, I had a planned vacation, and it started like in the beginning of February. And when I was going there, I was like, should I go out of Ukraine? Would it show that I'm like afraid or something? And I was like anxious about going away from my country in that time. Um, yeah, so for the most of February I was away. Uh, but then I came back home on like 22nd of February. And I remember the time very well. On 23rd of February, I met my friend and we went to a bar. And we met other friends there, and we were talking about the possible war. And these friends of mine told me one of them were going to Donbas area to volunteer. Another one also was preparing and already started to do something. And we had this like disturbing kind of conversation, but at the same time we were drinking and singing Ukrainian songs in the bar. And I went home at night. I didn't sleep, and then the invasion started in the morning at like 5 a.m. or 4 a.m., something between that. And so it was all very surreal, because, you know, we couldn't really understand, like, are they bluffing? Is it really gonna happen, or is it just some political games? But then you hear the sounds of explosions over your head, and and everything is fucked up from that moment. So I was really panicking. I was living alone at the time, and I didn't understand what to do. So, you know, when you're in panic and you don't know what to do and you didn't sleep, I choose to just go to sleep in the morning when everyone was going away from Kiev, because we already had like the first plan was to seize Kiev. Then then you can have power all over Ukraine. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And when everyone was packing the stuff and like going to cars and going away from the city, I just went to sleep. Then I woke up, and that's when my brother came to me, kind of to save me from this panic attack. And we spent a night at the bomb shelter. It was really scary, and the most scary part is when you don't understand what to do, when you are in shock about everything that's going on, and you don't understand what will happen. And of course, we couldn't know if if they can occupy Kiev or not. So a day after, my friends took me. They had luckily a place in their car, and we went to Lviv. And it was a really hard road because some of the bridges were blown up on the way out of Kiev. So yeah, it was days of really huge anxiety and fear. And then the next months was also like being constantly like reading the news every second, trying to understand what's going on. And that was a time when I already went to Berlin. At first I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to stay in Ukraine. But the thing is, when like there were so many refugees, like internal displaced people in the west of Ukraine, that there was no place to live, like no place to stay. So my family also went from Zaporizhia. I'm from Zaporizhia, and we decided to go abroad together. Thankfully, they didn't seize Kiev, so we still have our freedom, but we realized how huge price of a freedom is.
Yeah, because that was actually my next question. So yeah, as you said, you decided to leave, but why does somebody then come back? Why did you decide to return?
Yeah, that's like after I fled to Berlin when it was really scary to be in Kiev. Some of my friends stayed in Kiev, and we were constantly in touch, asking how they are, and they were like preparing Molotov cocktails at home, as we have experience of Finland when they fought, like just people fought
Like
with
guerrilla
Molotov
styles,
cocktails, yeah. And then after some time, after 2 months, in May 2022, it was my first time when I returned to Kiev. Kiev was already like kind of safe because no Russian tanks were around anymore. And that was the moment when life started to slowly come back. That was the time of the first festival in Kiev. It was not like an electronic music festival, it was arts festival. It had theater, performances, and it had a couple of live acts. But it was not about dance music because no one could think about dance music yet. It was like everyone was so shocked still and traumatized that you could not think about parties and stuff. And then in summer, so when almost like half a year of the war passed, slowly there was this like evenings of chill electronic music, like not very fast. And of course we had curfew. So it would be like until 8 p.m. or something, maybe 9 p.m. Max. But I was still living in Berlin. And I was returning like for months or like for several weeks, also in autumn. But I was still afraid because of the, you know, attacks on Kiev, rockets and drones and stuff. I was still afraid of that. So I couldn't imagine that I would go back to live in Kiev soon. But I was attracted to it all the time. I wanted to go home, of course, because living abroad as a refugee is not really a nice experience, and nothing will be like home, right? So in autumn, I was there when the first blackout started, and there were talks about that winter would be really hard because, you know, without light, without heating, in winter is not really fun to live. And also in media there were messages that like for people who fled, maybe don't return back because our system could not, like you will make it easier if you don't use the resources. So I thought that I wouldn't come to Kiev in winter at all. But then what happened is I came to Kiev in winter and I stayed there for almost 2 months. And I was living in that blackouts and it was like one of the best time in my life, to be honest. Which could sound crazy, but when you think about it from another side, it's not about the light, it's not about the heating, it's about people. So I came back and I was spending time with my closest people, and we were sharing these beautiful moments. And when the light would turn off, we would have a dinner with candles or something. And even this like Russian attacks, of course, you're afraid of them always. And I have these pictures like, what if the rocket like goes to my house? But the feeling of safety, like I choose community over the feeling of safety. I choose to be with my people, with my loved ones. Yeah.
Because, yeah, you know, a year and a half later, the war still continues. The state in which people are living in Ukraine right now might be now seen as a form of new normality for you, right? But of course, Ukraine is not in peace. It is in a state of war. Has your view, maybe, of what it means to live in peace in any way changed from what you perceived peace to be as before? And how do you, what is this new state of normality that you're living in now? You started talking about that as well. But because, you know, in the wake of war, people might think that the only thing that you can think of is war, right? You're eating breakfast, you think of war. You go for a walk, of course, you think of war. An alarm maybe goes off, you think, of course, of war again. When you're out with friends, are you talking about war? But yeah, what is truly the case? What I am trying to ask is, what is life like when you're living in a constant state of war, of fear, and of lack of peace in reality?
Yeah, so the thing is, even if you live in Berlin, for example, even if you live abroad, you are not living in peace. Like, yeah, you don't have air raid alerts. You are not afraid that rocket would hit you if you're in Berlin, but you have your family or like your friends back there. So you're still, like, even living in a safe place, you are still afraid all the time. You are still in this context. Doesn't matter where are you. And yeah, when you're in Kiev, you're much more deep in that context as well. But every Ukrainian in that context constantly. So when you're in Kiev, you're trying to live your life, but what you're thinking about is how you can help. I have, and almost everyone has a friend who's serving in the army, and they constantly in need. So we are trying to collect money and organizing these parties and events. It's not just about forgetting about what's going on. It's not the escapism. We have like the major club in Kiev, K41. They opened in October 2022. And since then, they have parties that collect like 3,000, 300,000 hryvnias at one party, which is like about what is it? It's about like 8,000 euros maybe in one party. Sometimes it's 500,000 hryvnias. So like people come in there, are constantly donating, and it goes like in every part of our life. So you're trying to keep up with your life, but then at night you hear the siren and you're trying to sleep, but you're afraid of death at this moment, which happens constantly. And in May, it was one of the worst times. They had like attack in Kiev almost every night. So people couldn't sleep. Actually, in Kiev, like everyone was really tired because every night you have this alerts and you go to the bomb shelter, and it was really getting on the nerves. But thankfully, we have anti-aircraft defense, and that's why I'm still alive also. And that's starting another topic about the weapons and why we need help and why we need more. We need to defend ourselves. So, if not for other countries, for our partners who give us this like patriots and stuff, we would not be able to fight back. And I think we will have the threat of Russia for a long time. But if we build a really strong defense, then we will be able to keep living.
If we take a step back, because you started talking about the importance of the party scene of clubbing right now, but Ukraine, Kiev especially, became one of the major big party capitals in Europe at one point, right? Why do you think that is? What is the appeal of the Kiev party scene for, well, a lot of people, a lot of Europeans, a lot of people from abroad coming partying to Ukraine, to Kiev? How does it differ maybe from the clubbing experience that we might know, that people know from the West maybe?
It's actually like a little bit hard for me to analyze that in full, as I was like growing up in that.
Yeah.
And Kiev just has this amazing, vibrant scene, and culture was really on the like very fast developing. Also after Maidan. But yeah, we have so many talented people. I don't know. It's just Kiev is somehow. It reminds me of Berlin, of course, like a lot of people were telling that like Kiev is a new Berlin, blah blah blah. It has a different context. It's a different country, and it's not the same. But we have like several things that are, you know, can make the same atmosphere, kinda. So for many countries in Europe, you have, for example, like curfew for parties, that it should stop at 3 a.m. or like at 6 a.m. or something. And in Kiev, we didn't have any of that rules. So you can party for 48 hours or something. Before the war, of course, when there was no curfew. And yeah, just like community is very strong. And I think Ukraine in general is a really interesting place to start a new business and start a lot of new initiatives, because it's also like it doesn't have many restrictions that could stop you from doing something interesting. For example, like one festival in Dnipro, Gogol Fest, they made a performance in the metro that was building like in a place where, like, for example, in Germany it would be impossible because of the safety regulations and stuff and blah blah blah. But in Ukraine you can also take the whole train, like rent a train, put it like make an art train that would go through all Ukraine to go to a festival. And like things like that would take years in a place like Germany to go through all the bureaucracy and stuff. And in Ukraine we don't have much bureaucracy. It's just like you can do things like that. So it's a very big field for action. I think that's one of the reasons why our culture became so vibrant.
So you were organizing events prior to the invasion. Maybe if you tell us maybe about the parties that you were organizing. What were they like? Did they have like a theme? Where were they happening? And maybe people are, as you've said, still organizing events today. People are still clubbing. People are still partying. I know you are forming the collective Cuticor. How has it maybe? Of course, it has changed. Of course, but how has it changed? Maybe.
Yeah, you mean the organizing events
Just
before the
organizing
war
events,
and
yeah,
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was always a challenge to organize something, but also we were doing that with the collective I was a part of before. It's called Groove, and we just realized we want to organize parties where we will have music that we like, which would be like the craziest music, not. Like the place where you can experiment as much as you want. So we needed to create a space for us, and that was a collective that gave birth to many artists, because we ourselves started from that, and many people just joined us, and they had a freedom to do whatever they want, if of course we are in the same on the same page. And we were making events like every week, and you just find what you need from like people, you just like collect all the things you need, maybe not having money, not having budget for the event, but you just make it all together. And then Corona came, so the scene had this challenge and tried to survive in this time, and like in 2021, in the end of 2021 and 2022, the scene started to be as active as it was before again. And also we had like a lot of tourists coming to Kiev, because places in Europe were still having quarantine, and it was not allowed to have any kind of events and blah blah blah. but we had everything going on. So we got like full planes of people from Berlin coming to a party for the weekend to Kiev. And this development that was really like going really fast stopped by the invasion. And as I said, for the first half year, there were almost no events. It was hard to think about organizing anything that would be close to a party, because you cannot think about dancing when like people are dying constantly. But what changed over the time is that like realization came that you cannot put your life on hold, and this war could go for years. It seems that it's not gonna end tomorrow, and what we need to do is not to let our culture just die in these circumstances. We need to put our effort to develop it even in this time. And what like the phenomenon of what is going on is that our culture becomes even stronger in this time of crisis. That's one of the ways for I forgot a word, but like fight back, kinda. So by making your culture stronger, you don't let to destroy it, because that's what Russians always wanted to do, to destroy our culture, to say that there's no Ukrainian language, there's no Ukrainian culture, it's just a part of Russia, it's just a dialect, and blah, 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 blah. And by creating more, by being more active, we are saving ourselves from that. And like one of the insights is, yes, you cannot put life on hold, even if it's dance parties. Imagine if if the war goes for 5 years, and in these 5 years you had no festivals, no events, no parties. Then when the war will finish, you will have no clubs, no artists, nothing, which is not really good. Yeah. So that's why it's important to keep going on.
I've mentioned Cuticor a few times now. So this is a fairly new collective. We were talking before. You have already organized some events, but maybe tell us more about what is Cuticor and what do you envision it to be in the future?
So Cuticor rose from the need to balance our scene, which is lacking of Flinta and queer artists. And that's a very complicated question in times of war, because a lot of women fled Ukraine. Men are not allowed to go out the country. And we had a lot of female artists also leaving. Like I was one of them, but I returned. And that's why the scene that was imbalanced before is now even more imbalanced. And I'm tired of seeing the lineups where you have like 10 men and 1 woman. And I just felt a change, a need of change.
Grounded is not one of them. I think we should mention that. Yeah,
Yeah,
Festival is not one of them. Yeah.
Well, when festival is organized by feminists, it's impossible to
different
have like Cuticor is made to bring some balance to the scene, and it's like it's a small drop in the change. But one of my main plans now is maybe more not to organize parties, but to organize workshops for Flinta and queer people, to help young artists to feel more confident and for them to see that they are supported, and it's not like the men scene. We already held one workshop about a month ago, with K41. And yeah, it was amazing to see these people are interested, but maybe a bit more scared, you know. Not more, a bit scared, a bit like shy, and like I understand that they need support because I also needed that support when I started, and we are just we were raised up in this society that tells you that like you're a woman, so you shouldn't have many ambitions, and it's not the girl thing. You should be shy. You should be like small and
Stay at home.
yeah, yeah, like yeah. So we just need to show that if you're a woman, you also you can like make everything you want. You can be brave. You have this support, and that's like the main goal of Cuticor.
As you've said before, of course, clubs and dance floors create communities, and of course, communities can be powerhouses of change, right? Uh, you're also an activist, raising not only awareness on the war in Ukraine, but also the question of women in electronic music. How do you see this connection uh, with activism in general, or your own initiative, your own activism, being connected to the clubbing scene? So, how do you perceive the role in activism in electronic music?
Um, yeah, so the thing about also context of growing up in Kiev, and by growing up I mean like I moved there when I was 17. So that was like from 17 to now. It's the time when I was like growing as a individual. Yeah. And it happened in the context of like post Maidan Ukraine, where we and yeah, it's not only about Maidan. It's like we had several revolutions in the last 30 years, and it's all about like having a personal responsibility and understanding that you can change things. That if you don't like something that's going on, like with the government, you can go on the street and change that. And so I was also like forming in a community that has responsible people, and like for example, when we were witnesses of the police adjustment, we organized a protest, and we came like organized a huge party in front of the police station. It was like 1,000 people, maybe more, and that's how like young people in Kiev, not only in Kiev, they are like those people who go to parties and stuff. They're not just passive, you know. So it's very like deeply connected. That like our whole community is about making changes, is about being active, and it's also not about not just about the clubbing thing, but the whole like cultural scene, that it's very like interconnected also. And yeah.
I remember the Polish electronic music collective Oramix and made a graph a few years ago depicting artists from from the East playing at bigger events and festivals over Europe. What came out of it was that it was obvious that artists from the East, from the so-called European periphery maybe, are much less often booked at venues. Is that maybe something you have noticed as well? And how do you look on this difference? Yes, of course, between the East and West in general, but maybe mostly in electronic music.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really exists, and also like yeah, the thing is like to hear the voices, to listen to people from from the east, and in our situation, we are also like facing with westplaining, when people, for example, from Germany. Yeah, I'm talking a lot about Germany because I was living there, and I'm like deep in like I know this context. But when people from Germany think that they know better than you what you should do, one thing like everyone should remember is that you should listen to those who are living through that, like going through that, and maybe Ukrainians understand better what they should do than Germans. And thankfully now it's changing, and thank you for inviting me here. And yeah, I just hope that would be like also about the event and the music, that the changes are on the way, because we have now like Kiev became one of the party capitals, and it will recover. It will like this war change that, of course. But I really hope, and I'm really looking forward for the recovery of the scene. And then we have like a great festival in Poland, Unsound, and a lot of people come there for this festival, and it becomes like a center of culture. So it shifts, it changes, and yeah, just like hoping for the best.
Now, obviously, you're still traveling, you're touring. Has that been more difficult than before, or what is it traveling like right now? Maybe if you tell us, because we were talking about that before, how did you come to Ljubljana today? Yeah, for example, yeah.
Yeah, to come here, to be here today, I went out from Kiev on Tuesday evening. So it took me like from Tuesday to Thursday to come here. It's and it's a usual thing. Like if you want to go from Kiev to Berlin, it would take you 2 days, sometimes 3 days, because of course, like the sky is like you cannot have any flights from Ukraine, so you have to go by trains. So it takes like a long ride. Yeah. And one of the things is like when I was still thinking of should I move back to Kiev, this was also one of the questions, because I had like a very active like touring, and when you live in Kiev, you should consider it that going to every event would take you like
Days. Yeah.
yeah,
Seems
like last month we went to Berlin, just for one day, just for one event, and the whole trip was a week, because days on the road were like it was 5 days on the road and 1 day at the event. So yeah, but the thing is, it worth it. Like it's a bit hard to travel like that all the time. But for me, it's much more valuable to live at home, and that's the price I could pay. It's okay, like to travel for 3 days. Yeah, many artists, like for example, Mel G. I think you know about her, a great artist from Hamburg. She moved to Kiev before the war started. Like she was living there for a couple of months, and then the war started, and she would maybe love to live in Kiev, but the problem is she's like very actively touring, and she wouldn't be able to live in a place where you need to travel like that. And some of the artists I know stay in places like Budapest or Berlin, just because otherwise they wouldn't have a chance to travel as much as before. But for me, it's still like I prioritize living in Kiev more.
So as you are traveling, of course, you're meeting people that are only spectators, so to say, of the war in Ukraine. People with opinions, not people living in war, which means that there sometimes might be, I believe, a bit of a cognitive dissonance between the two, in a sense. Um, how can Europeans be uh, allies, in a sense, in a time of war? In Ukraine, one you've mentioned before, of course, to put it in quotes, giving voice, giving a voice to the people of Ukraine. But on the other hand, I'd also really like to know what maybe really bugs you, irritates you. You've mentioned West-splaining the most when talking about war with people outside of Ukraine.
Yeah, so the first thing is that we have an immense support in Europe, and it like you can feel it really. There are so many nice people who are trying to help, and sometimes maybe they don't understand the context that you live in, but they're willing to listen and they're willing to understand, and that's incredibly valuable. And trying to help in any way they can, which like. On my experience I had in Berlin, when like people host you, people who invite Ukrainians to the events, people who organize fundraiser parties, even though like it seems like it's not what they have to do, but they are so deeply uh, yeah, like they want to help, so they do everything they can, and that's incredible. But sometimes you also meet people who are trying to teach you and trying to tell you like, oh, you should give up territories, maybe then the war should be over, and they make this like dumb assumptions of like totally being out of context of what's going on, and like saying, for example, that this like pacifist movements that you shouldn't give weapons to Ukraine because it will just like make a circle of violence. These are people, I think, like a little bit not in touch with the reality, and that's why we need talks like that to to explain how it is. And before the full-scale invasion started, I would consider myself pacifist. And I mean, I still want peace everywhere in the world, right? It's not okay when people kill other people, and that's not what Ukrainians also want. All of my friends who are soldiers, it's not their dream to be there.
No.
They're just doing it because they don't have other choice, because they need to protect us. They need to protect us from death that Russia brings to us. And the problem with this pacifism and weapons is just like, if you have one country that has all of the weaponry and you have another country that is like, we had a weak defense because we gave up our weapons in the 90s, like we gave up everything in exchange of I'm talking about the Budapest Memorandum. We gave everything in exchange of this like I forgot the word, like safety. You understand me, yeah? But now what happened is we have this crazy authoritarian country, and we need weapons to defend ourselves. It's easy. Like, if someone comes to your house with a gun and you give them a rose, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. You need to fight back. And yeah, the weapons that we need is not to make more violence. It's to stop the violence. If we have an anti-aircraft defense system, for example, we can stop deaths that are like that Russia tries to.
You can protect yourself.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's easy. It's even, I feel strange of like explaining that.
Yeah.
But for some people who say that like you shouldn't give weapons to Ukraine, you just have to explain that. And it's really hard sometimes because like when someone thinks they know the best and someone thinks they are already like, yeah, I'm the smartest, it's hard to talk to this kind of people.
Maybe one more question before I maybe open up the panel if anybody is going to have any other questions. But we've been talking about this if it is truly possible to imagine peace when you are at war. This is, of course, a very difficult question. But will Ukraine ever be the same, or how will it change? Not if, but when the war is over at one point.
Yeah, so the thing is, when we think about Ukraine in like, when you said the same, and I imagined like, for example, 15 years before when there was no war with Russia and stuff. But what I'm also thinking about and what I realize is that we were never in the peaceful state. Like we were occupied by Russia. We fought for our independence all the time. And if like you think about 90s, when we had this independence, we still had like Russia trying to like to rule our culture and stuff. And for example, there was a situation with the island in the like next to Crimea when Russia started to build a bridge to that island, which is a Ukrainian island, is like the border with Russia. And that was like a real, like it was close to a military conflict. And it was like 20 years ago. And so we always had these problems. And we had, like, they were selling us gas for, and Ukraine was paying by missiles, with missiles. And now these missiles are shooting at us. And this like problem of having such a nasty neighbor, it will not go away, unfortunately. Like I would, like we dream about this huge wall and maybe like river with alligators and maybe like there's a big ocean between us and Russia, but it wouldn't be like that. We will have this border. And that's why, like, even when the war is over, we would still have tension all the time. And that's, like, realization of this came with a big price. Because before that, people would maybe live in a illusion of peace. But yeah, now we realize that we have to build this system that would protect us, and we would be constantly living in this state, I think. And maybe, like, one of the scenarios, the peace in Ukraine is possible if Russia would stop to exist as it is now. If it would stop to be like an imperialistic country, if it would be like many different territories, because there are so many different nations actually live there that were like colonized. But realistically, this process now, I think it's irreversible. So this dream of Russia becoming just like many independent countries, it doesn't seem real. So, yeah, unfortunately, there's no actual peace possible, I guess. And the thing is not only the Ukrainian problem. The peace is very fragile, and everywhere in the world, people should be careful, and people should understand that you have to protect the peace. You have to be strong to maintain the peace, and it's not granted.
Of course, peace
What's-
is a transnational project in a sense, right?
Yeah, and like when people think that peace is normal and the war is something out of norm, I think it's vice versa, because humanity was in wars all the time, and peace was just like the small times in history. And Europe is now, and I'm not talking about Balkans, I'm not talking about your region, but like West Europe didn't experience war since the end of the World War II. And that's why a lot of people live in the illusion that peace is granted, you know? Because for 80 years they were living in peace. But yeah, it's not how it works, unfortunately. So you have to constantly educate yourself to have a critical thinking, and that would help to maybe stay in this state of peace for some time. But it's very fragile.
Okay. I'd like to open up the panel if there are any questions, maybe. Yeah.
You know, you alluded to how distant like actual peace seems, and I think even in an immediate sense, like the end of the immediate war seems difficult to figure out how that's going to happen. How, in that context, operating in Kiev, do you keep despair at bay? Because sometimes looking out at an endless situation that has to be difficult. Or how do you as an artist keep that sense of hope and optimism? Not that you don't have moments, but how do you find that sense of optimism and hope to keep going and doing the work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's in our nature, like the human nature, to keep going, because we love life, and we would just like trying to stay optimistic because we don't have other choice. Because you can just like fall down and cry all the time, but it wouldn't help you in any way. So even in the scariest times, you just try to keep going, and you just like try to believe in the best and move forward to it. And that would keep you alive, like like on the water. Yeah, because sometimes I'm really like pessimistic, because I look at the world and I realize how scary it is, and how crazy it is, and how crazy people are. And I'm also human, and I'm also crazy, like everyone here. Like in general, like we all have this aggressive side inside of us. But if you go too deep into that dark thoughts, it's hard to go back, and it's really easy to fall into depression now. But I think with the support of other people, we are just like trying to keep each other in a good state. And I'm really fascinated by some of my friends who are going through the hardest times. And just like a week ago, I spent a weekend with a friend who's fighting at the front line. Luckily, he has a chance to go to Kiev sometimes, because some of the people, they have vacation only like 1 week a year, or like 2 weeks a year. He has this chance to come to Kiev, and he tells me, like, when I ask him how he is, he tells that it's both very bad and good. And I cannot imagine what he goes through. Even like when he tells me, I cannot imagine because he lives at the front line. It's full of death. His close people die quite often. He is facing that every day. But he's still optimistic. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So my question would be, I think I want this to be recorded, so that's why I'm asking you this. Maybe could you tell us like 3 things, I would say like maybe point to point. What do you think we can do to help now like people from Ukraine, and what can we do like practically? Like people from Slovenia or even people from, everywhere.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's this one obvious thing. It's like the most obvious is money. The war is all about money, and we constantly need support. And what happens in Ukraine is like self-organization. So it's not like we just pay the taxes and then like the government decides, but we are always like opening these fundraisers. For like basically people we know, for our friends, for the very practical things they need. And I'm not only talking about the soldiers, which is still like it's the most important part. If you help the military, you prevent deaths. But then we also need humanitarian aid and blah, 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 blah. So there are a lot of active Ukrainians who open these fundraisers, and what's going on is that like thousands of people donate a small amount, because of course like we are not very rich, but we can donate like 2, 3 euros, 5 euros, 10 euros, I don't know, like a small amount that you can, that is easy to donate. And that's how like the power of many people given a little bit helps to like change and like help in a bigger way. And what happened recently is I had like one fundraiser and I was posting stories in English, so my international friends could see also that like, hey, please donate like a couple of euros. And only 2 people from abroad donated, and like hundreds of Ukrainians donated. And that's when I realized that like everyone is tired of this. Everyone just skips this like posts and stories, but that's the most important thing right now. And maybe like, okay, that was the obvious thing. And the second one is like educating yourself, being aware, maybe also like spreading the narratives, about like understanding what's going on. And that's what you're doing already, like by organizing this panel as well. That's maybe like sharing some information on your social media and stuff, and just like supporting informationally. I think that's the 2 like most important things. I don't know the third one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Margareeta. You can catch Human Margareeta at 2, I believe.
Yeah, 2 a.m.
2 a.m. at Metelkova. The next event is going to be at 12:30. It's a Flinta meetup. And of course, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.